We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
Looks like the rain has gone.
G'day and welcome to the Mankind Podcast, the show where we break the molds of modern manhood to prove there's more than one way to be a man. I am your host today, Brandon Clift, returning after a couple-week hiatus over the Christmas and New Year break. It's nice to be back to the show after I tackled and battled COVID. I'm finally feeling healthy and just so eager to get back in front of the mic, interviewing these fantastic guests for the year to come. And I'm telling you, the 50 episodes we booked in 2021, man, you just wait. Just wait for what we have in store for you over the coming months. 2022 is going to be huge, and I am so grateful to be in a position again to bring these guests and their insights and their wisdom to you. Now, today, we are going to be talking about boundaries and an interesting intersection, how we can better establish boundaries for ourselves and others through sexual healing. I mean, you might get those little rings and notes of Marvin Gaye right now as I mentioned that. And it may not be too far off from those words. You see, it's so interesting as I've been going through my journey in men's work and through this podcast. You know, sexuality these days is becoming far more relevant in conversation, far less taboo to talk about. And little did I know just how powerful the work is that can be done through sexuality and through moving through traumas and negative experiences and using kind of sexuality as a tool to do so. And which is why I want to bring on Melissa Hite from Higher Sex Education, because I believe that she has the perfect experience and insights to help you, help me, help anyone listening better understand how to establish clean and healthy boundaries, first for ourselves and for others around us. Now, what has given Melissa these insights in her journey and something we dive into today is in large part to her experience working as a legal sex worker in a brothel. Now, you heard me right, legal sex worker in a brothel. And if you're like me, when I first heard this, I instantly had these preconceptions, these biases, these assumptions, and these judgments of what that meant. We get into it this interview, but just to give you a taste, I mean, because of how media has portrayed sex work, video games, all the rest, my assumptions were that anyone in sex work is either being trafficked or they have a bad relationship with their father, they're trying to seek validation. Like, I'm not proud to share this, but these were my assumptions because I just wasn't informed. But to meet someone like Melissa, who was able to share just how positive an experience that was, how it wasn't from a place of desperation, but a place of inspiration to give, and that the work she was able to do with her clients was life-changing for many of them. This for me is like just scratching the surface, but for Melissa, who's deep in this work, I mean, and for those of you who may know more about this stuff, this work is so incredibly powerful and so incredibly new for me. And my hope today is that through this conversation with Melissa, you can get a deeper and better understanding of what healthy boundaries mean to you. As well as I hope you can walk away with some great tools to be able to better establish those healthy boundaries for those around you as well. Whether that's in the workplace, whether that's at home, whether that's in the bedroom. Boundaries are so incredibly important, and I'm learning this more and more as I move through life. And so it's with great excitement and joy to introduce you to our interview today with sexual boundary, inspiration, spirituality, body work, coach and guide from Higher Sex Education, Melissa Hite. Enjoy. Melissa, I am so happy and pleased that you're joining me today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Brandon. I'm super excited to be here and have this conversation. Appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Introduced by Dr. Jolie Hamilton, the amazing Dr. Jolie. I've had so much fun connecting with her the 2 times she's been on the show, and she's been so kind to kind of open up her Rolodex. When I asked her, I just because I enjoyed time with her so much, I said, who are the amazing people in your life that you think have a powerful message that could benefit the audience of the Mankind podcast? And you were one of the top of her list. So when I found out about you and did some research and saw the work that you do with men and women around boundary setting and how it all aligns with body work, I just went, yes, we have to have her on the show. So the fact that you're in front of us right now and we get a chance to tap into your wisdom really excites me. So I would love to, I'd love to give you a moment to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your story, and then we'll get stuck into it.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Brendan. I'm really happy to hear that. I really love and respect Dr. Julie Hamilton and her work. And we definitely have a kinship, and I think we're both kind of pointing towards the same direction of goals and how we'd like to change the planet a little bit. So thanks for sharing that feedback. My name is Melissa Hite. I call myself a sexual spiritual advisor. And basically that's me working with people with the whole channel that we're in, our whole body. So the sexuality, the base of us, the spirituality, this top crown chakra of us almost, and the integration of all those pieces. So that's my jam, is the integration of the totality of who we are, which definitely includes our sexuality. A little about me. I've been helping people unpack their stuff with sexuality for about 13 years now. It's definitely a big passion of mine, and I've done it in a lot of different capacities. It really started where I bridged my work with sexuality, really started when I started teaching pole dancing to women in Salt Lake City. And that was really eye-opening to see how transformative it was for women to move their hips for the first time, to get in their body and to have flow and to be sexual, like in a public space with other women around, to feel sexual feelings. That was really transformative for a lot of people. And that bridged work that I had done previously, somatic awareness stuff. I had worked with apprentices from the Hendricks Institute, Gay and Katie Hendricks.
Oh, wow. Oh, big fans of theirs.
Oh, good. I'm so glad you've heard of them. I am too. Huge fans of theirs. I spent 4 years studying their work, and I'm just, it's such foundational work for what I do.
And to the listeners, if you haven't read The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, that was one of those kind of like turn right moments for me, reading that book. So yeah.
It's literally right behind me. I was just going to grab it and hold it up to the camera. It's literally right behind me right now. I love that book. So yeah, I did that work for a while and did a lot of somatic work for a while, and then bridged it with the sexuality stuff. And I've been rolling with that for, like I said, the last 13 years now. A big portion of that work, I know that you had just asked about this, a big portion of that work was working in a legal brothel in Nevada, and doing sex work in Nevada. And that informed so much of what I do now with boundary work, with healing around sexuality. I had no idea what a healing experience that would be when I got in so many years ago, when I got into the work. For me and everyone that I worked with, that's what hooked me. That's what got me stuck. Like, okay, if we're doing this level of healing for people, I'm in. I'm doing it. I don't care what other people have to say about it. I know there's a lot of stigma and a lot of judgment, but if this level of healing is happening here, I'm in. I'm doing it. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Yeah. Wow. See that, to me, you speak about the stigma around sex and sexuality, and I always get intrigued when I hear about this kind of work, especially being done in Salt Lake. I mean, I myself lived in Salt Lake for a year, and just that year alone, I met a lot of LDS, Latter-day Saint men and women, and I met a lot of people that were previously a part of the faith, those that were venturing into it. And it was interesting when conversations around sex came up, just kind of where the doors came down. It was like, oh yeah, we're not going there. So I'm curious, when you were teaching pole dancing, were there women that were actually like practicing Latter-day Saints in those classes, or?
Absolutely.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
Because it was very much geared towards fitness.
Sure.
It was a fun fitness routine. And so it wasn't particularly erotic. It was a workout, but the workouts involved circular movements, involved like rolling our hips in circles. And that alone is groundbreaking. for people who've never done that.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine and these are my words, so I don't want to be assumptive, but did you almost get a sense of liberation from some of these women as they finally got a chance to move?
Oh yeah, there was full breakdown in tears of why have I never done this? Why did I not know my body could move in this way?
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely groundbreaking. Yeah.
So I'm in the shallow end of the pool, you could say, when it comes to my understanding and awareness around sexuality. So when I first had Jolie come onto the show, we were speaking about sexual shadow. My interest in bringing her on was because of just the powerful work I've seen done with men on new warrior trainings in our men's circles around overcoming their shame around sex. And even though a lot of my personal work at that time didn't necessarily hinge upon my relationship with my sex and sexuality, I was still so intrigued to see how sex has been something for many people, and from this lens, for men, that has influenced just about every facet of these men's lives. Whether it was an early sexual experience that traumatized them, that has now knocked onto how they turn up as a father, as a business person, as a husband, and so I'm starting to, as my toes get deeper in the water, starting to see just how much power there is around investigating sex and sexuality, because my previous understanding around sex and sexuality was intercourse, pornography, and gender, sexuality, just defining what gender is. And so I think we can have a lot of fun with this, especially speaking to kind of the stigmas around sex. And you mentioned that your working in kind of the league, and forgive me if I'm not phrasing it correctly, so legal sex work out of a brothel in Nevada. I would love to learn more about that too, because I have to own and admit my preconceptions around that is, that women who get into that line of work mustn't have some grounding force in their life or relationship challenges, or what's their relationship like with their dads? It's not nice or kind, and I don't feel good sharing this, but these are the preconceptions and scripts that my head comes up with, especially with how sex workers have been portrayed in media, right? Video games, television. So I want to ask you, how do you generally bridge the conversation of explaining how that work was so fulfilling versus what people assume it to be for laymen's like me, just figuring this stuff out?
Right. It depends on the context who I'm talking to.
Sure.
So I bridge it in a lot of different ways. It's one of the reasons that I am so vocal about my work, is because we need more examples of what it looks like. I was extremely privileged to be in legal work, to be in the environment that I was in, and I very much understand that most people doing sex work do not have the same privileges that I did, which were safety and security and autonomy. I did whatever I wanted to do. I did not do things I did not want to do. And that was just kind of period, end of story. There was no coercion and maybe I should do this and I have to. I had no kind of survival sex work, which is a whole different story, doing survival sex work. Wow. So again, it's one of the reasons that I'm really vocal about it, is to give a different point of view. And that's what got me curious in the work. I saw a woman on Oprah who was working at a brothel, and she was interviewed on Oprah, and she was so eloquent and beautiful and intelligent, and just so many things that went against my preconceived notions. And I was super inspired by her. I actually wrote an email to her and asked if I could interview her. I lied and said I was doing a paper for school and I wanted to interview her. But I was just like so magnetically drawn. It was uncontrollable how drawn I was to this person. And I now know why. I now know that I was called to the work. At the time, I didn't realize that was happening. So I wrote her an email, and she got so many emails a day that she passed it on to management. There was miscommunication. They said, we need you to send pictures. I thought that meant to prove that I was 18, because that was also part of the email, is you have to be 18 or older for us to even be having these conversations. So confusion, miscommunication, and I got hired, not planning on getting hired, but I got hired at the brothel. And my partner at the time came home and said, "How was your day?" And I said, "Well, I got hired at a brothel today." And they paused for a long time and said, "Okay, we have some conversations to have." And so we spent some time having some in-depth conversations on what felt good to both of us and boundaries, and do I want to do this and do I not want to do this? And what I decided at the time is I wanted to try. I wanted to see what the world was like. I wanted to go in and like really feel out what the world was like. A deciding factor for me is I imagine myself, 80, 90 years old in my rocking chair. Having not done it, I would have regretted it. Just some crazy thing to do, to go work at a brothel for a week or whatever it may be. Wow. And so I decided I could go try it for a week. And if it was traumatizing, if it was a terrible experience, I felt comfortable with the support that I had, the resources I had at the time, to be okay and to heal from it. And I went and I worked for a week, and my first client, like I said, just really had me hooked. It was such a profound level of healing that it was palpable for him. Who he came in as and who he left as was night and day a different person. And I was hooked from there on out.
I'm curious of your partner's process around finding out that information and you're choosing to move into that field. I just love to get some insights into the kind of those conversations and what that brought up for them.
I think you would need to ask them, the real specifics, but from my interpretation, and it was so many years ago, we were both doing deep Hendrix work at the time, and we were both clear that we were our own person and that we couldn't control each other. And we had good agreements on what was acceptable and what was not as far as physical interaction with people.
Right.
It probably would...
Because there's other degrees. There's different degrees, especially as we talk about boundaries like that. Sexual intimacy isn't just what you expect of penetrative kind of sex. There's so many different, like there's tantric, there's, different practices that are outside of what is just expected, what you'd think would be. So you were able to define that for yourself and create boundaries with your partner.
Which was the initial framework in realizing, in me learning that I have boundaries, that I have a say in what happens to my body. So that was like the impetus for me to start to practice that. Like, okay, no, this is okay. This is not okay. And as I evolved in the industry, I got really clear and really nuanced with understanding what my body was okay with in each moment and what it was not okay with in each moment. And 10 years of that really got me really good and really understanding of how the whole process works, how it works to know what's true for us, and then second step, to honor what's true for us in our actions, implementation of that truth. So there's two steps to it. There's the internal boundary work and there's the external boundary work. That's what I've dubbed it as. The internal boundary work is knowing and understanding your personal truth, that which defines you, and that's ever evolving because we're ever evolving creatures. And the external portion is how we implement that into the world, our attempt to implement those boundaries into the world.
I love that our introduction of boundaries for the podcast, 50 episodes in, we're only just getting to this, such a crucial part of life and personal sovereignty. And so I'd love to kind of create those distinctions and look a little bit further into, internal versus external boundaries, what it looks like to establish those, kind of the discovery process. So for me, my understanding of internal boundaries are kind of the agreements I make with myself and how clear I am with those agreements and kind of those boundaries, kind of knowing where my limits are. But I've only found those from touching the stove. Like, I haven't been able to kind of like create those boundaries without having ventured to certain places. So when that stove has been touched, or someone else has been at play and they've played a role in me having that, me feeling like I've overstepped my agreement with myself, that's when I've realized, to me, like, oh, I wasn't having a clear enough conversation with myself. But before I'm not the expert here, you are. So I'd love your kind of definition and explanation of internal boundaries.
Yeah. So you're on the right track, and it's even more nuanced. It's even more nuanced than that. And clarity, I'm glad you said clarity and being clear on it, because that is such a huge part of it. Internal clarity is such a huge part of it. And that comes from work. That comes from being really present and really asking ourselves questions and really in tune and aware of ourselves and our bodies and how we feel. So all of this information comes to us via sensation within our body. We are here embodied. We are sentient beings. We are here to sense, to feel our environment, to experience our environment. And we do that through our bodies. We do that through our perception and through our sensations. So, and our bodies are communicating to us all the time. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it is never not giving us signals and signs to navigate us through our lives. There's, infinite examples of, when you're drinking too much, I could go on forever about all the examples. Or
not speaking, witnessing something and not speaking up. I can feel it in the throat.
Exactly.
Pit of the stomach.
Exactly.
When I've hurt someone and I didn't mean to, so the body does have these kind of signals it can give us.
Right. Well, it always is giving us those. It is all the time giving us those signals. And the more we're in tune with it, the more we can walk this really graceful tightrope throughout our lives of how to navigate what's over the line, what's at the line, where you're at with all these things. And our emotions are a huge part of that. So all emotions have gifts that go with them. I'm gonna go a little bit tangential on emotions for a second. And this is from the Hendricks work, Gay and Katie Hendricks, bringing them up again. The 5 core emotions, according to them, are anger, fear, sadness, joy, and sexuality. And those are the core emotions. Anything beyond that are called secondary emotions, and they're combinations of those and deflections of those and different things like that. So one of the gifts, the gift of anger specifically, is knowing where a boundary is crossed. So if you're angry, or if someone else is angry at you, a boundary has been crossed. You didn't know, but you know now because you're angry. Yeah,
I feel violated. That's the only way I can explain when anger comes up, is I feel like there's been a violation.
Or resentment. Resentment is like this underlying seething kind of anger.
Yeah.
And that'll come up when a boundary's been violated, but typically unknowingly, and typically by both parties unknowingly. I'm going to sit and
those
be
are always
resentful.
Those are always fun conversations in a relationship where I'm like, I have this energy towards you, but I don't know what, it's, you did something. I don't want to own it. You did something, but yeah. Okay.
And that feeling is information. It's data for you to find where that line was. Oh, okay. What happened is it's when you did this, and I didn't realize that I needed to tell you that was too far for me. That's information for you. Your underlying seething resentment feeling, that's for you. That makes sense. That's
and
data
then
for you.
That's such valuable data too, because then for then the ball is, well, it's still in my court, but if I can communicate that, then my partner can choose to do what she does, what she wants with that information. But if I can at least communicate it for myself, I can't control her reaction or response to that. It's just great for her to know that ABC equals XYZ for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The more information, the better. The more data, the better. Because she didn't know that was too far, because there was no way of her knowing that line, because you didn't even know that line, let alone communicate it to her.
No one's at fault here.
No, not at all.
Okay.
But it's but it's good information for you both to get more clear on where that line is for you, whatever the scenario may be.
I hope you're enjoying the Mankind Podcast. The Mankind Project supports all kinds of men with men's groups and programs aimed at building self-awareness, improving relationships, and upping your game. If you're ready to take that next step and you're a man of color, check out the men's work for BIPOC men at bit.ly/menswork3.
So going through your experience with getting involved in sex work, I'm sure you were having experiences where you were able to learn quite quickly, like, okay, no, that's a boundary for me. Your body gives you that information. You're able to establish it in your mind. And I'm sure there's times as well that your body was like, ooh, that's uncomfortable, but it isn't a no. Perhaps it's a not now. Or so you're getting all these varying degrees of information, right?
Absolutely. And the more practice I got over the years, I got better and better at it, because what would happen is a time or two here or there is my body would be like, yeah, no, I don't really want to do that. And my brain would take over and say, well, I need that money to pay this bill, so I'm going to do the thing. And I would override my body. And we do this all the time. We override our bodies with our minds and with our thoughts. And when I would do that, it would get increasingly problematic for me, increasingly traumatic. It would never turn out well. And the more I did it, the more it exponentially didn't turn out well. So I got really clear, like, when my body says no, it has to be a no. And the sex work was high stakes stuff, you know, like there was a lot. My whole body was in on it. My whole being was in. You can't just like not be totally there. I'm not that kind of person. I was definitely present and fully into the experience. And so if my body said no to something and I went against it, it affected all of me, all levels and layers, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, everything. Wow. So with those high stakes, I got really clear. If my body says no, I have to listen. I must honor that. And that's the groundwork of boundaries.
Sure. And fortunately, it sounded like for you that you were in an environment at this brothel where you had autonomy to pump the brakes, time out, you know, and establish where your boundaries were. So, but isn't that interesting though? You still had those moments of, which are that's the kind of data collecting, right? Where it's like, okay, I've been asked to do this. I don't want to, but I need the money. Then you start to realize I placed greater importance on the money and paying the bills than I did my own want. And so a kind of stove touching experience taught you and created more self-awareness around your own internal boundaries. So this is starting to make a heck of a lot more sense for me with the internal boundaries. I'd love to shift to external, unless there's something else that you wanted to speak to around internal.
I could talk about it all day.
All day.
Sorry.
Well, external
I
now.
could talk about it all day.
No problem at all. So external now with bringing in other parties into this, if it wasn't confusing or overwhelming enough through the process of building these internal boundaries, now I've got my intimate partner involved. I've got my business colleagues. I've got all these different relationships in which, first off, I need to be clear on my boundaries. And then secondly, I need to make it clear where they are with others. Now, for a people pleaser like me, this can be challenging. It can be really challenging because it's very easy for me to compromise on my wants just to be the nice guy and not to rock the boat. So I'd love to hear kind of the basics, the white belt stuff around external boundaries and what that looks like in relationship, and perhaps an example that you may have to put it into context.
Well, external boundaries will never have any meat, any strength, any influence until you're solid and strong on your internal. I wrote a course on boundaries, and 90% of it is internal work. So because most of the boundary work we talk about, it is all external, and it's not going to go anywhere unless you're clear on yourself. So number one is internal boundaries. Number one is being clear with yourself, slowing yourself down, sitting on your own butt and asking yourself the hard questions, working through the stuff on your own, doing the work, doing the deep work. So that's paramount and never ending. You're not going to do that work and then stop and start just implementing those in the world and your external boundaries. You're going to always return to the internal stuff. The external stuff, again, only when you're super clear can you communicate the external stuff. And then there's all sorts of information and stuff on communication. That's almost the easy part, even though of course it's really hard, but that's almost the easy part. The hard stuff is the internal work.
Right. It's the discovery of the kind of data and how it applies and how it makes me feel. The conversation, although it may be hard to have that conversation, it's not necessarily unveiling any newer information about me in a sense of I just need to speak it out and see how willing, perhaps not wanting, but how willing my other is in this conversation, depending on the relationship, to discover kind of what that means.
And it's definitely, go ahead.
It just makes me think kind of like, are you aware of the Gottman Institute?
Yeah.
Kind of John Gottman's work. Yeah. So there's a great exercise that Christine and I use when we've had a fight or a regrettable incident. And we get to kind of do these back and forth rounds of sharing, like it's not you did something wrong. It's when I witnessed you or heard you say these things, this is what came up in me. And then to be able to tie it back to previous experiences where those boundaries have been, stepped or where those triggers have come in. It's been so amazing to go from, I'm so committed to being right in this disagreement. I'm so committed to you being wrong, to learn that, what we were fighting or disagreeing about wasn't the purpose of the fight. It was actually to unearth this new learnings and understandings from one another that, hey, we've been kind of trodden on each other's boundaries and not communicating it to each other. So I am not aware of how I'm doing it for you. And she has not been aware of how she's been stepping my boundaries because they were never communicated until now.
And that clarity is everything. Getting that clear within yourself is everything. And if you don't have that groundwork, you're not going to be able to do it. The degree to which you know and respect your own boundaries is the degree to which you're able to honor the boundaries of others. So if you're not clear and respecting your own boundaries, you're definitely, I'm not even going to say likely, you're definitely violating other people's boundaries unknowingly. They won't likely call you out on it because people are probably not that in tune with themselves either. We're all learning this. There's a lot of, I don't think most people are real good at this stuff, including myself. I'm still working on it every day. So they're not likely going to call you out on it, but the resentment, the hurt feelings, the walls of separation are gonna develop all the same.
Yeah, I hear that. It's really powerful the way you put that, is that, the degree in which I respect my boundaries will determine the degree in which I respect others. And I've learned that in my life. I've always considered myself a generous person, and how that's turned up has been when I have been generous to others, I have either overgiven or people have expected so much that I have kind of, really poured from an empty cup and gotten exhausted in those relationships. But on the same token, I have expected that from other people where I may not have earned the right to get that from them. I've expected so much out of others that have been generous enough to offer what they have and what they want to for me, that I then all of a sudden think, oh, well, I've got access to them now, their information, their experience, their time. But no, I hadn't earned it. So it, in every case, directly reflected back on how I myself wouldn't establish those boundaries. And like you said, work in progress. I mean, the other day I had a buddy reach out to me and he's like, hey man, 10 minutes, do you have 10 minutes? I need some advice. And this is one of few times that I said, man, I got nothing to give. Like from where I was at, it's like, I can't be this for you right now. I love you. I hope you get the guidance and support you need, but not now. And it was really hard for me to do. Because of the loving care I have for this guy.
Right. But was that better for you to do that, be honest and transparent where you were, rather than overriding your own boundaries, overriding your own needs, and giving him those 10 minutes and then being depleted for the rest of your obligations?
Infinitely better.
Right.
To say no. And the way it was received was even better. It was, well, hey man, how can I help you? And he ended up actually supporting me.
That's so sweet.
Which was, I'm very grateful for that friendship. So it was cool to practice that when it's something, there's a great book, No More Mr. Nice Guy. I fit that bill for a very long time as a nice guy, and I'm looking to change that narrative in my life, and I'm learning just how much boundaries are involved in that.
Absolutely.
I think it's so important what you're doing, Melissa. So important what you're doing, and you've clearly got a very strong grasp of this work because of your experience and because of, I'll try and word it this way. There is no shortage of people online right now that are coaches, that are gurus, that are experts. And sometimes when I listen to their content or I read their blogs, and I've read some of yours, and this is where I think you separate yourself, is there are those that promote what it is that they're selling, they're pitching, and you can tell, or I can tell, they have not integrated what it is that they're teaching. They understand it up in their minds, but they don't, you can tell it, they don't know it in their body. And when I've read your blogs and just from this conversation I've had with you, you have integrated this stuff. And you are continuing to. I love your humility in saying, hey, this is something I'm still working on, which is a breath of fresh air. It helps me from putting you on a pedestal that's not reachable.
Oh no.
To know that that you're human too. And so if with your permission, I'd love to know where your work is today around boundaries for yourself and what you're still learning for you.
Yeah, thank you. And that is vulnerable, that because again, we're all working on this. We work on the internal part and getting clear with our truth, but then it's a whole nother thing, and that's work in itself. And then it's a whole nother thing to implement it into the actions in your life. I would say my learning edge and my struggle with my boundaries is with my intake of food, with what I ingest in my body. I have a lot of clarity on what is good for me, what is not good, to very nuanced level. I have an extreme clarity on what my body needs and what my body does not need. My body does not need cheese. My body does not need refined sugar. My body does not need, processed chemicals. I really know what helps me function optimally and what does not. And I don't always choose that. And that's for me to, number one, not judge myself about, not beat myself up about, not have any kind of cruelty on, but have a really sweet curiosity on. Why did you, what is happening there that you chose to eat that thing? What's happening there? And that the curiosity leads to the answers. The judgment, the beat up leads to separating myself from the information. It leads to a layer between me and the little nugget of information that I need of, I was overwhelmed in that moment. Or whatever it is. If I judge myself, I don't get that nugget. I don't get that lesson for me. The curiosity leads me to that lesson.
That's a good practice, because I go straight to judgment, like the self-talk, especially knowing better. I'm currently in a program called Men of Discomfort, and it is about removing choices. It is about that they're not touting as being the best nutrition or the best exercise. It is simply about removing choices and choosing discomfort. And I'm just there, just like, okay, so I'm not allowed spices in my food other than salt and pepper, but I snuck some into that meal, and I'm like, Brandon, you knew you shouldn't. Like, how fucking weak do you have to be to choose paprika over keeping your agreements. And it sounds almost trivial and stupid said out loud, but it has an impact in my body. I feel it in my guts when that stuff comes up, and it just goes to show just how that internal dialogue is my head, throwing all this judgment my way, rather than I love that kind of sweet curiosity of like, well, you know what's triggering this? What's leading to this? What are the pieces? What's the formula that makes this so, or this behavior so? So I love hearing the humanity in what you're sharing, and it's very relevant for me at this at this phase of life. And I know this is a conversation many people can have in their minds, whether they go to their phone and pull porn up again, or whether it's alcohol, whatever numbing vices someone might have. You shared your relationship with food, mine's that too. So it's great to see that in you as well.
I love to hear what you just said about you feeling the physical effects of going against your truth. Your truth was you're not adding spices. The physical effect was this, oh man, why did you do it? It's paprika. Why did you do that? You felt it in your body that you went against your truth. And so I wanted to point out that there's a somatic response always when you go against your truth. And these things happen because our willpower is a finite resource. When you are rested, when you are clear, you are on that path, you know that you're not adding spices to your food because that is the commitment you made. But when we have commitments like that, and then, we have the kids and we have the job and we got to do the thing, and then the medical plea, like all of the things happen, it whittles us down to us not having a lot of willpower. And when we don't have a lot of willpower, like, you know what, screw it. I want some paprika right now. And we don't have that energetic reserve to stick to our commitments. So a large part of my work is getting all people, to stop this. It really is a toxic masculinity trait, not a male trait, but a toxic masculinity trait of go, 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 do, this obsession with productivity. We have to fight that, because what that equals is us having an inability to honor our own boundaries. You have to rest. You have to schedule downtime. You have to take care of your body. Otherwise, you're violating yourself and violating others. And it creates this stream of violence, this outpouring of violence. Does that make sense?
Oh, I feel it in my bones right now.
Got it.
I feel it in my bones because I compare myself to the Goggins and the Jocko Willinks of the world, like this. And I love what you said. Willpower is a finite resource. And that is so true for me. Whereas I feel like it should be a default to be someone with, insane willpower. And I have these people in my life that are 5 a.m. every day, working out every day, breath work every day. And I use them as this I put myself on the measuring stick with them, and it doesn't provide any motivation or satisfaction. If anything, it just causes me to judge myself even further for not being that way.
Right.
Whereas going for a more curious, loving approach, I think would be the most helpful and healing, to perhaps work towards that one little step at a time, one little challenge at a time. Like I'd be remiss if we didn't chat further, because now that we have you here, I'm so grateful for this, to chat a bit more around sexuality and around boundaries. I was really amazed. We were fortunate to have Justin Baldoni on the show, and he shared that a lot of his work around his healing journey as a man has been around his sexuality. It was only later in life that he fully acknowledged and realized that when he lost his virginity to his girlfriend, it wasn't consensual, and he does feel, don't know his current state with this, but that he was taken advantage of, and that it was violating for him, and that his journey continues around unpacking kind of his sexuality and his sexual health. I'm trying to think of the formation of the question here, but I've been able to meet men that through sexuality have been able to heal some of the deepest burdens and wounds that they've carried in their lives. And when I hear about you talk about your involvement in sex work, what I was hearing was that you are giving a gift and helping men almost just get that healing experience. Mm-hmm. Which for me, it's like, oh, it must just be dudes with popped collars kind of under the trench coat sneaking into these places. No, for some men, it's deep soul healing around something that is very huge for them. Mm-hmm. Why do you feel it's so important that men do their work around their sexuality and their boundaries around their sexuality?
That's such
loaded question. Loaded question. Take as much time as you like.
That's such a great question. Our sexuality is everything. It's at the core of who we are. We cannot separate ourselves from our sexuality. We are born of it, through it, in it. That energy affects every part of our life and everything in our life. And most of us have quite a distortion, at varying degrees of distortion, from wounds, from trauma, from pain. We all have trauma just growing up in this civilization, in a sex negative environment, and saying that sex is bad and wrong and dirty. Even if no one told you that, it's expressed. Sexuality is overly repressed and then overly expressed. And we have these huge extremes. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. We have these huge extremes, and we don't have much balance and maturity and this middle way with our sexuality. So if you have wounds, and again, we all do, we're all healing them. If you have wounds with sexuality, it's affecting all of your life, and it's affecting everyone in your life. I worked very much, we all attract certain things, and it was very clear in the brothels what we attracted. Some women got all sorts of really fun and crazy kinky stuff all the time. Some women got like all the really older men. Some women got all the really younger men, this kind of thing. I got a lot of what I call like heart cases. I had a lot of war veterans and a lot of people with disabilities and a lot of what I would call severe touch deprivation. Men who have had no touch in 20 years. Wow. Have been in an entirely sexless marriage or have some kind of struggle or disability, whether it's physical or mental or emotional or these kind of things, have some kind of disability, but we all need touch. There's not a human on the planet that doesn't need touch. We know that is a human need. It's the only need that we treat in our society as a luxury. We don't treat water or food as a luxury. If someone says, I'm thirsty, you don't say, oh, well, get over it, go for a run, you'll feel better after. No. You're thirsty, you get some water. You're hungry, you get some food. With touch, we very much downplay it as a need, but we understand scientifically that it's a need. So, I had a lot of men that just, cried in my arms. A lot of men with any number of disabilities, including injuries or different things to their genitals, included, this touch deprivation. Yeah. I had widowers that they didn't want to date again. They didn't want to get a girlfriend, but they were hurting. They were like broken inside that they had lost their wife, and they wanted someone to hold them, and they wanted to have a release and have an outlet without having the dynamics of a relationship. So yes, sexuality is the most healing path that I've been able to find. And I know that I'm here on the planet for healing. I'm also a massage therapist. And I make sure to tell people that I've specialized in sports medicine and lymphatic work, because I've not done sex work with massage therapy. I don't think it's a bad thing, but it is an illegal thing. And I just haven't wanted to play in those realms. I haven't wanted to deal with the fear of doing illegal work. Yeah. So I'm very much into touch work and the healing of that, but none of the massage therapy I've ever done has even held a candle to the transformation and the healing I've done with sex work, with being able to touch someone at their core, at their wound, and adding a lot of like love and space and permission into that place. I know nothing that's more healing than working with sexuality in a very direct and conscious way.
Yeah, such a gift. When I think about some of the men in my life that are going through challenges, intimate challenges as well, or they have disabilities, and to think about the barriers for them in the world that we've established, right? We have, sexuality is either incredibly repressed or it's extremely showcased, expressed. Yeah, thank you. And so where to find oneself in the middle, or where they land for them in their journey, for you to create that pathway and that opening for them to explore, I think is so powerful. I'd love to hear more about Higher Sex Education, your business, and your coaching, and how our listeners can find out more of what it looks like to get involved.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I do one-on-one coaching. So just, if you want to unpack some stuff and work through some stuff, and just do the one-on-one coaching. And I can do work with couples and alternative relationships, thruples and whatnot. But I will always work with the individual first. My work is very much based around integrating yourself. So if I'm working with a couple, I'm working with two people, and occasionally we'll meet as a couple. So there's that. And then I have a course on boundaries. And this course it's big and in-depth. It's not if you want to dip your toes in. This is if you really want to dive in and do some deep work. I initially wrote it as a 12-week course. No one has completed it in 12 weeks because it brings up so much stuff and we got to work through so many things. So it's now a go at your own pace 12 module course. People are getting it done in anywhere from like 4 to 6 months is pretty typical.
Yeah.
If you want just a taster of that, on my website, highersexeducation.com, there's a little freebie. There's a little like understanding boundaries introductional PDF that I'll send you for free. Yeah. You can just get a little teaser on that. And then if you want to fully dive in, we can do the course. We can do the big work. And I would love to do that. And again, if it's, if there's a man listening that wants to work on anything with his sexuality, I can just do the one-on-one coaching. And I really love that.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah. All of that at highersexeducation.com. And then my social media handles are on the website. So you can find those there. Perfect.
We'll make sure that all of those are linked in the show notes for those of you listening that want to find out information. Final question, Melissa.
Mm-hmm.
We've been talking about Gay and Katie Hendricks, and I think back to a conversation I had with Martin Root, who's friends with Gay. He was a co-author of one of the Chicken Soup for the Soul books, and recently released a book called Project Heaven on Earth. And there's an amazing question that he asked me, and I've actually went on to ask many people, is if you could wave a magic wand and create your vision of heaven on earth, what would that look like? And so I would love to ask you that question of what that would look like in relation to your work and your mission. If you could wave that magic wand, what would that be?
I feel like my answer is going to be triggering to some. So I want to say with a disclaimer, I say this because I have seen the effects of such a thing. If I could wave the magic wand, I would have everyone be intimately connected with themselves, have an intimate relationship with themselves, and know themselves, know their triggers, know their wounds, know their learning edges, and have humility around all those things. I think that's first in the healing process. I think that needs to come first.
Yeah. That self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful. Beautifully said, Melissa. Thank you so much for your gift. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for being here and being committed to the work that you're doing. I have learned a bunch that I'm looking forward to unpacking when I sit with my journal later on today, and just grateful for this time that you've been able to join us for the show.
Thank you so much. This has been really great. I have so much more to talk about. I'm glad we touched on a lot of different subjects, and yeah, this has been really great. Thanks for having me on.
Sure. So why don't we plant the seed for until next time? And for those of you listening, thank you again for joining us for another powerful episode of the Mankind Podcast, the show we break the molds of modern manhood to prove there's more than just one way to be a man. Lots of love, and we'll see you next week. This has been the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. I have been your host, Brandon Clift, and I personally want to thank our guests for joining us today and imparting their wisdom from their experiences in this amazing journey called life. And of course, I want to thank you, the listener, because through your attention and your support, you make it a heck of a lot easier for us to let men out there in the world know that they are not alone and that there is more than one way to be a man. Special thanks, of course, goes to my incredible team, Marketing and Communications Director Boyson Hodson, producer and editor of this episode, Michael Russo, who makes me sound so much more intelligent than I actually am, so of course, special kudos goes there. And if you've been enjoying the music throughout this episode and all of our episodes, check out Jim, Donovan, and the Sun King Warriors. I have links to them in the show notes. Now, the fee for this episode is simple. If you found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, remember that life doesn't happen to us, it happens for us, so long as we rip the pen out of fate's hand and become the author of our own story. So my friend, pick up the pen and we'll see you next week. Lots of love.